Welcome back, everybody, to Simply Relational, where we're elevating marriages and we're equipping you parents.
Yep, that's our goal.
So that's our goal here. So thank you for joining us again. Last week, we started digging in a little bit more on the parenting end and started talking about a tree or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Roots,
Discipline.
roots, and apples and discipline and stuff like that. But basically, we got to the point of that being stewards. We're stewards of our children. We're
Yep.
not owners.
No.
We're not owners of our children. We're stewards. So, with the time that we have with them since they were born, till we kind of release them,
Yeah.
after high school and college, and to grow up like our kids are
Which again, I think
adults.
is an
So,
important point is our job as parents is to be preparing our kids to be adults.
yeah, that's for
Like
sure.
that, to leave the
Yeah,
house, not
yeah.
focusing every situation when they're in our house, but preparing them to leave.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the big thing is preparing them. So it's we talked about roots and how are we helping them grow strong roots and not focusing on the shiny apple, of them being perfect children and stuff like that. But what's more important is them having strong roots uh, as children, which will grow strong trunks
Yep.
and limbs and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yep.
so this week, what are we going on, Shelley?
Well, today I want to dig a little bit deeper into probably continuing on from last week with discipline, but one of the most debated topics, because I think a lot of times people
Mm.
think like for parents, a lot of the debates come around like how much time do we give them for technology or what school are they going to go to? But you and I both know in working with a lot of parents, one of the most debated topics is actually how do we discipline our kids? We talked a little bit about it last week, but we're going to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty today. A lot of parents ask, should I spank? Should I not spank? Should we use timeout? Should we reason with our child? Should we use consequences? Do we have consequences at all? And so I think a lot of parents spend countless hours debating the methods of discipline, but I actually think they're asking the wrong question. Because I think a lot of times the question is, should I spank or should I not spank? But the better question is, what is the purpose of biblical discipline?
Mm.
The spanking's the tool, but what's the mean? Like, what is the reason for it?
Yeah.
Because I think when we understand God's purpose, we can argue about the tools all we want, but if we know what the goal is going to be,
Mhm.
we define what those tools are going to be to get us to that goal.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think when most people hear the word discipline, what word usually comes to mind? Like what word comes to your mind when I say discipline?
Well, old school,
Mm.
it's discipline. You're talking about spanking and thinking about being whipped or the paddle
Yeah, so
or
punishment.
yeah, punishment, the
Punishment. Yeah.
belt, getting the belt and wait till your father comes home
Oh yeah,
kind of
heard that
thing.
one a lot. Yeah. The funny part is actually the actual definition, especially in Webster's dictionary, which honestly, Webster's dictionary actually aligns, the very first definition does align with the biblical perspective, which was
Oh,
surprising to me. But the actual definition from Webster's, the first one is training that corrects, molds, and perfects moral character.
hmm.
So when you think about those words, training,
Mhm.
correcting, molding, developing character,
Mhm.
like that's what the
That,
definition of
wow.
discipline is.
That sounds the discipline part. That sounds like you're starting to define an athlete in a way,
Mm,
when how an athlete needs to have good discipline
yeah.
to be to have excellence in what they do, or anything. It doesn't have to be athletics, it could be just somebody that does any job,
Hmm.
need to have some discipline because if you do something over and over again to perfect your skills, your
Yeah.
mind, body, and soul, as an athlete does, to run faster, jump higher,
Mm,
to whatever it might be. That's discipline. And a lot of times, the discipline is mind, body, and soul, but it comes from the heart.
yeah. Yeah.
It
We're
comes
going
from
to
the
talk about
heart.
that. It really
So,
does come from the heart. Webster's second definition does actually not align with the biblical definition of it. It's controlled gained by enforcing obedience and order.
Yeah.
Although I will say, if we're being completely honest and transparent,
Mhm.
we've disciplined that way.
Yeah, I think many,
And I think a lot of
well,
parents do.
most parents do. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
way, in a way, I grew up.
Hmm.
Especially my father. He, it's because how a lot of things are carried through
Yeah.
generations. So how he was brought up,
Hmm.
he brought that into the picture. But my mom is brought up slightly different, so kind of did some balancing there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you say that it is multi-generational. Typically you discipline similar to how your parents disciplined. But I think that we're actually in a society now that it's completely turned the pendulum.
yes,
Because I remember your dad even using words, and I can remember these words like kids should be heard and not seen. Like I remember those
oh
phrases
yeah,
that your dad would say.
yeah,
And I think that that's where our generation
yeah,
had parents that were very much that way.
yeah.
And then I think our kids had a little bit lesser version of that. And now I think the world has a whole different version.
Oh,
We'll talk about that here in a
the
minute.
yeah, the pendulum on that, so I'll let you go on, but the pendulum is all the way over,
Yeah.
to where almost there's no discipline going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
We'll
but
talk about that.
yeah,
Let's jump into, we talked a little bit about how Webster's aligned with biblical discipline. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Webster's discipline or the Bible?
The Bible.
The Bible.
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's jump
okay. I'm
into it.
sorry, I misunderstood. So yeah, Ephesians is very good, and we've got it up here. So Ephesians 6, it's very accurate. It pinpoints it really good, and it begins with a command to children.
Mm.
It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother." God absolutely expects children to obey.
Mm.
Parents, that's us as well. We should expect our children to
Yes.
obey, but we'll connect to the dots with that soon. Paul also didn't stop there. Two verses later, he turns to parents and says, "Fathers,
Mm.
do not provoke your children to anger. Bring them up in the discipline and instructions of the Lord." And
Mm.
that's very interesting because God gives children something to do, obey and honor. And he also has parents something to do, lead in a way that is worthy of that
Mm.
honor. And but then the biggest word is provoke. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
This is where the heads collide with
Mm.
children when we provoke our children, and because we're being very angry or
Mhm.
loud or whatever, in what we're doing. So we don't need to discipline out of anger because it crushes their spirit. Instead, train
Yeah.
them, instruct them, help them to grow. And how are we going to do that?
It was making me think of Proverbs 13:24, where it
Mhm.
talks about whoever spares the rod hates the son, but whoever loves him is diligent to discipline him. And it's funny because I think about today, we use that verse so many times, whoever spares the rod. And I think
Yeah.
we think a lot of times that's what the focus of that verse is on.
Yeah.
But the focus is actually not on the rod.
No.
The focus is actually on the love.
Yeah. So let's explain the rod for a second. A lot of people just are very tunnel vision about the rod and just think it's like the rod, the
Mhm.
belt, the paddle, whatever. But the rod we can use this properly in a way of whatever we're using to
Yeah.
discipline the child. So there needs to be something to discipline a child
Yeah.
with. So
Yeah.
do not spare the rod. Have a rod of
Yeah.
discipline.
But the focus again is on because it's the loving thing to do. Loving parents do not ignore correction. And I think that's what we miss in our society a lot of times right now. I think many times we see that word discipline, like we talked about it here a minute ago, is punishment, is this negative connotation. But from a biblical perspective, the loving thing to do as a parent is to discipline your child.
Oh yeah.
The method is secondary. The rod is secondary. The mission, the actual discipline part, is the primary thing that
Yeah.
our focus should be on.
Good, 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 good.
This is where I think that a lot of parenting conversations get off track. We spend our time debating on how do we do this, and do we spank? Do we not? Is spanking a bad thing? Is putting them in a timeout a bad thing? Is telling your child no a bad thing? We said that one a couple of,
Yeah.
last week, I think it was,
Yeah.
when we were talking about the story of the parents who didn't want their kids to hear the word no. Not hearing the word no is not in itself a bad thing.
Hmm.
If it had continued with, we don't want to just say the word no, we want to tell them what we want, not
Yeah.
just what we don't want. But if you're only doing it from a, we don't want them to ever feel hurt, or we don't want them to ever feel like they're doing something wrong, you're not
Yeah.
disciplining and you're not loving your
No,
kids
no.
by doing that. But I do think that it's important to know your kids as you're doing this as well. I think about for us, so we had two kids, we're grown adults now, but we had two kids when they were growing up, very different personalities, and the discipline
Yeah.
methods, the tools that we would use were very different for both of
Very
them.
different.
Like we learned really early on, our daughter Ashley, like the thought of a spanking, like she
Oh,
melted.
it devastated
Mhm.
her.
Yeah.
I only remember spanking her once.
And it was a
And
very mild
it was
spanking because it
it
was
was
such a
just, yeah,
devastating
it was a
experience.
devastating experience for her. It was a
Mhm.
mild spanking, and just the even thought of it, even bringing it up to her about go to your room because,
Mhm.
you're going to get spanked. It
Yeah.
devastated her.
Yeah.
So it devastated her so much that
It crushed her spirit.
it was
Mhm.
crushing her spirit.
Mhm.
She was not learning anything. She wasn't being
It was just
disciplined
fear.
and conditioned to anything. It was fear. And
Yeah.
so it took her and gripped her so much that she forgot about everything else in the world. And so, why would you do
Yeah.
that to your child if they're even forgetting why they're being
Yeah.
corrected, instructed, disciplined?
And then Austin came along. And Austin was a very different personality in that.
Oh
In
my goodness.
For
Yeah.
Austin, he loved people and he did not want to miss a moment of anything that was happening
Yeah.
around him
Yeah.
or even standing still. So for him, I learned really early on having him stand in the corner. In fact, he stood many times in the corner
Oh,
of the room with
many,
his
many
nose pushed
times.
to the corner
I think we had
because
to wash the
yeah,
wall.
because he had to be separated. I can remember him standing there and just screaming out, "Please just spank me and get it over
Just get it,
with."
bend over, just spank me, get it over with. Hurry, I
Yeah.
just want to go back out and play and be with my friends or whatever. So,
Yes. And for him, many times his lessons were learned because he was focused on why he did not want that to happen again.
yeah,
Now, if we're being honest, there was still a little bit of a fear-based piece in there. And
sure.
I think that goes to my next point that it is really important to make sure that, what's the old phrase? Make sure that the punishment fits the
It's the
crime.
crime. Yeah.
It's similar for discipline. You want to make sure that the discipline connects to what you want to grow. Because if the whole purpose of discipline, remember, we're defining it as you're training, you're correcting, you're molding, you're shaping. If we're doing that, you want to make sure that the consequences connect the
Yeah.
child to
Yeah.
what it is that you want them to grow in.
Hmm.
And so this is where I'd go back to the piece of when parents just use the phrase, do I spank or do I not? My answer to you would be, it depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
depends on your child and it depends on what it is that you're trying to grow. If you have a child that's trying to touch a hot fire
Hmm.
and you know that that fire is going to create severe damage, reaching out and smacking your child's hand, spanking their hand
Yeah.
is an appropriate consequence because you want them to associate pain,
Yeah.
but pain that didn't create damage,
Mhm.
right? So that's an appropriate time where you would do that. But on the flip side of that, if you have a child that maybe lied to you about a situation and didn't give you all the information that you needed to have, and your only resort all the time was to spank them,
Yeah.
that may or may not correlate to them. What it might actually teach them is, oh, I just need to make sure I don't get caught in that
Yeah.
again. It
Yeah.
didn't actually teach them what you wanted them to do. It simply just reinforced that's not what I want to do again. But I don't remember your training.
Yeah.
They don't always know what you do want them
Well, as
to
the
do.
Bible says, train a child in the way they should go.
Yeah.
Okay. So that verse can go a lot of different ways, but here's an analogy of driving down the highway, you got a 4-lane highway and you're not paying attention. You're doing something wrong, like looking at your phone and
Mhm.
driving, and you're drifting off into another lane. and then somebody, you as a parent, reach over, grab the steering wheel and bring them back into the lane, that you're correcting them. You're putting them back on course, because you're training them to go down this one lane. And if they want to change lanes, it's fine, but you need to do it appropriately, not by error, by mistake,
Yeah.
other areas why kids would want to do something. But
Yeah.
we're trying to
Well,
keep them in a lane.
let's go back to the analogy of you're driving down the road and you're speeding
Hmm.
and the policeman pulls you over. The natural consequence for that is you get a ticket.
Hmm.
When you get a ticket, it's a consequence, like, oh, okay, my driver's license could be on the line now, and I'm going to actually have to pay a fee that goes with this now. It connects directly to what you did, and you're going to think about that every time that you're driving. But if the consequence wasn't a ticket and the consequence was instead the police officer just pulling you out of the car, and I mean, obviously you would not get spanked, but just feeling like you got spanked, it would not have the same
Wow.
kind of funny.
Yeah.
It would not have the same correlation for you because it didn't connect directly to what it was that you were doing.
Correct. You want to tell them when you got your ticket?
Oh, no, we don't want to talk about that.
Okay. Say she got a ticket 2 days in a row at the exact same spot. Yeah, this was years ago, but two tickets.
Yeah, I was 16 years old. My only two tickets, I wish I probably should knock on something right now. My only two tickets that I've had in my life, but they were 2 nights in a row at the same exact.
Exact same spot.
Yes. So I did not learn my lesson the first time, but the second time I did learn my lesson and I've not had a ticket since.
Well, so okay, there's an example. It might take once, twice,
Yes.
3 times in a disciplined situation of correction and
Mhm.
instruction to help the child stay in their lane or understand what they should not be doing or what they should be doing.
Correct. But the consequence should always reinforce the lesson that you want the kids to
Oh,
learn.
can't say that
The
again.
consequence should always reinforce the lesson
Yep, yep,
that you want your kids
yeah.
to learn. Otherwise, all you were doing is the second definition in Webster's is you are simply enforcing obedience, which in the moment might get you what you want, but it's not penetrating a heart and it's not going to have lasting results. I kind of feel like there's two ditches that parents fall into when we're thinking about discipline. There's two extremes. That's why I'm calling them two ditches because there's two extremes. So one side is a frustration driven punishment. And we've all been there. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. We've all been there. The child disobeys, you get angry, you get frustrated, maybe you're embarrassed, maybe you're humiliated, maybe it's something they're doing in public.
Mhm.
And the consequence is you're letting your frustration out and you're going to teach your child a lesson in this.
Mhm.
But the lesson is really driven from your anger and your frustration. The lesson is not driven from what the growth you really want the child to have in that. The behavior might stop for a while. We've seen this in
Mhm.
you're in the store and you see a parent reach out and either scream at a kid or swat a kid really quick,
Yep.
and they're just swatting a kid as they're walking through, but nothing's being said. They're screaming, the kid's screaming. There's no lesson happening there. There's a lot of frustrations and a lot of dysregulation, and the parents leading
Yeah.
on that one. But often the kids don't really learn the lesson from it. What they learned was, oh, mom gets mad really easily, or dad gets mad really
Mhm.
easy. Ooh, dad's got a temper, like he didn't like that. Or what I talked about a little bit earlier, then they learn, ooh, I need to figure out a way to get around that to
Mhm.
not get caught in it. They didn't
Yep.
really learn the lesson. But then there's the opposite pendulum of that, the opposite ditch, which I think kind of falls into a lot of what we would call the gentle parenting of
Yeah.
today. And I want to be careful when I use that connotation of that word gentle parenting, because the word in of itself or gentle parenting in of itself isn't all bad. I mean, having calm parents, being compassionate, listening to your kids, those are all good things.
Mhm.
The problem is our society has turned it into a really bad thing because what parents are being told now is that you should negotiate with your child. You should let your kids decide because you don't want to push them one direction or another. So you should let them decide. The child determines whether they're going to obey or not. They're the ones that's actually determining this. This is not biblical.
No.
This is not biblical. You've given away your authority. Children need loving authority. They need parents who are willing to lead, not follow.
Yes.
So that aspect of gentle parenting is completely false. It is not aligned biblically at all. In fact, what's happening is kids are training more parents than
Yes.
parents training kids.
Yep.
Every negotiation, hear this closely, every negotiation teaches a kid how long they can argue with you. Every time you get into a negotiation, you're teaching them how long they can argue with you.
Yeah.
Every delayed obedience teaches them that persistence will get them what they want,
Hmm.
even if it's wrong. Someone's always being trained.
Hmm.
Are we training our kids or are they training us?
Yep.
Someone's always being trained in it, though. So I think really today, I really just want to make sure that we're driving home the point that biblical discipline is consequences have to happen. A loving parent disciplines their kids. It's not, a loving parent is not the absence
Hmm.
of discipline.
Yeah. I want to also reiterate on the honor and
Mm,
respect. The
mm,
fifth commandment. It's huge. Honor thy father and mother. Um, it's the only commandment that has a promise to live a long and prosperous life.
mm.
The other
Oh,
thing
that's good.
is
Yeah.
another thing is teaching and guiding your children, instructing and discipline your children appropriately helps them to honor and respect you. And when they can carry that on to other things,
Mhm.
to other people, to other situations, um, that is absolutely a godly heart. It's a godly heart. So, parents, please, when we're dealing with our children, when you're dealing with your kids, pause. We talk about the pause
Yeah.
button for a second. And are we doing this? Find out, what's the right disciplinary way for your children. But are you living a life? Are you parenting? Is your marriage and everything else that your child is seeing and hearing and receiving from you? Are you giving them and be an example of being honorable and somebody to respect? Because if they don't honor you and respect you now as a child, I guarantee you they will not honor and respect you when you're older.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a big issue there. So
Yeah.
honor
In
and
fact,
respect.
you talked about the pause, and that is a tool that we put together. There's actually 5 things that you do, and we've got a link here that you can go to see what that pause is. And so I encourage you to look at this link. It's a freebie. It's a tool that will give you
Yeah.
to get on and be able to look at what that pause is. But you're absolutely right. Your end goal, here's what their role in that is.
Mm.
But our role as parents is to give them something to honor so that they
Yes.
can obey and
Yeah.
honor their
Well,
parents.
because with that, the next step is you're teaching them because as young kids, especially little tiny kids, you are the first reflection of God to them. Okay,
Mm,
understanding.
yeah.
We are their first reflection. And so, what are we reflecting? And so, with that being said, if your children learn to honor and respect your mom and dad, their mom and dads, there is a greater chance that that will carry on to the ultimate relationship that we have with Jesus Christ and to honor and
Yeah.
respect our Lord and Savior. So it's
Yeah.
very crucial that they learn honor and respect.
Yeah. When we faithfully train our kids over time, we're not just correcting behavior or trying to change what their behavior. We're growing the strong roots that God will use to produce that fruit
Mhm.
that we talked about a couple of
Yeah,
weeks ago.
yeah,
So we talk about every week leaving with a stone.
yeah,
The stone this week is discipline is not about controlling behavior. It's about training the heart.
yeah.
That is
That's
our
good.
end
Yeah,
goal.
that's powerful.
Discipline is not about controlling behavior. It's about training the heart.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We pray that you've got something out of this, a stone that'll take over the giant in your life and parenting.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you watching,
Yep.
and we'll be praying for you. And we
Yeah.
also covet your prayers for us, so that
Yes.
the Krager ministry continues to grow, and many people will hear and see what we have to say, that we prayerfully put it in prayer, that God will use us and give us the words to help everybody out
Yeah.
there. So,
And again, check out our website at kragerministry.com
mhm.
and look for that freebie tool on how to use the pause as a
Okay.
parent.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.